Nothing is casual. Everything requires work, research, and thought. Agonize. Take it seriously. Don't leave it up to someone else, and don't phone it in. There is no such thing as a shortcut if you are going to turn in good work. These wise words were spoken by one of the world's highest paid radio figures, and he is also known as one of the rowdiest hosts in America. Dubbed the king of all media, this man has a stunning net worth of $650 million, and he has been a part of many people's daily routines over the last few decades. Howard Stern was best known for his show, The Howard Stern Show, which was aired from 1986 to 2005 and was widely popular across the country. However, things were not always so smooth flowing for Howard. Once upon a time, he was just a scrawny, long-haired kid who dreamed of becoming a radio personality DJ. Little did he know that in the future, he would become one of the most admired and loved personalities in the history of radio. How did Howard Stern end up accomplishing such a feat, and what led him to pursue being in the entertainment industry as a career? Welcome back to Business Explained.
Let's get down to business.
Stern was born Howard Allen Stern on January 12, 1954, in New York, the youngest of Ray and Ben Stern's two children. He spent many years of his youth in Roosevelt, Long Island. Ray, Howard's mother, was an office clerk in New York City before she became a homemaker, and she later took up work as an inhalation therapist. Ben, Howard's father, served in the U.S. Army on Long Island and in California during the war. He later worked as a radio engineer at home in Manhattan. This stint as a radio engineer led him to open his own recording studio, and he eventually became a co-owner and operator at Aura Recording Inc., a Manhattan recording studio where many cartoons and commercials were cut. This was perhaps where Stern got his first taste of what it was like to work for the radio industry. He seemed to have inherited the love for radio from his father, who would frequently tape Howard and his sister during the holidays. Howard recalled that his father was sometimes short-fused and would frequently quiz them on a lot of current events, which gave a young Howard the opportunity to work on his banter. Howard would get sarcastic when he did not know the answers to his father's questions, and Ben recalled how he dealt with this in an interview. His father recalls, when I asked him these serious questions, he ended up being a wise guy. And so I got mad and said, "Shut up and sit down. Don't be stupid, you moron." From a young age, Stern also showcased his love for performing. In the basement of the Stern family's home in Roosevelt, Howard would often put on elaborate puppet shows for his buddies. Initially, the performances had come at the urging of his mother, and Howard would perform them for his family. However, Stern quickly gave them his own twist. The title of his show was The Perverted Marionette Show, and its name really did showcase its nature. Even at a young age, Stern wanted attention, and he was not afraid to let people know about this. However, things were not easy for him, especially because of who he was and where he lived at the time. Stern wished to be in radio by the age of 5. He did not listen to the radio much during his earlier years, but he named radio personalities Bob Grant and Brad Crandall as his early influences. To further encourage Stern, his father set up a microphone, tape machine and turntable in the basement of his home, which Stern used to record his make-believe radio shows, incorporating different characters and pre-recorded prank calls, sketches, and commercials. He even visited his father at work to watch some of the great voice artists record, including Don Adams and Larry Storch work on Tennessee Tuxedo and His Tales. This began his desire to be on the air and do a show, rather than play records. However, Stern was an outsider in his neighborhood, and he would feel like an outsider for a lot of his life. This was an identity he clung to for much of his career, which settled into his life at a young age. Roosevelt was a primarily black neighborhood, and Stern had trouble fitting in. During his career, Stern often looked back to his bullied past and how he was always getting into fights around the neighborhood and in school. Stern once recalled that one of his best friends, who was black, was beaten up for hanging out with him. To remedy this, the Sterns moved to Rockville Center, which was a largely white community. However, Stern experienced yet another identity crisis. It seemed completely alien to the then 15-year-old high school student. In his biography, Stern said, "It wasn't any better in Rockville Center. I couldn't adjust at all. I was totally lost in a white community. I felt like Tarzan when they got him out of Africa and brought him back to England." So, Stern mostly kept to himself and focused on school and developing his skills. In 1972, Stern declined a place at Elmira College to instead pursue a communications degree at Boston University, but his average high school grades caused him to spend the first 2 years in its College of Basic Studies. In his second year, he started work at the campus radio station WTBU, where he played records, read the news, and hosted interview programs. Later, he co-hosted a weekly comedy show named the King Schmaltz Bagel Hour with 3 of his fellow students. However, the show got cancelled during its first broadcast because of their skit titled, Godzilla Goes to Harlem, which was viewed as racist and improper. Stern took lots of drugs, including hard ones like LSD and Quaaludes during his studies, but he quit after he experienced a difficult trip on too much LSD. In 1974, he gained admission to the university's School of Public Communications. He then studied for a diploma at the Radio Engineering Institute of Electronics in Fredericksburg, Virginia, in July 1975, which earned him a first-class radio telephone operator license, a required certificate for all radio broadcasters at the time, which was issued by the Federal Communications Commission. With the license, Stern landed his first professional radio job at WNTN in Newton, Massachusetts from August to December 1975, doing air shifts, newscasting, and production work to get by. He gathered as much experience as he could during those days. Following his BU graduation, which saw him finish with a 3.8 GPA and a bachelor's in communications, Stern immediately set out to begin his radio career. His first gig came at a small radio station in Briarcliff Manor, New York, and it was here that it dawned on Stern that he would forever be relegated to a life of mediocrity if he continued on as a straight DJ. So I started to mess around. It was unheard of to mix talking on the phone with playing music. It was outrageous. It was blasphemy. In DC, Stern experienced a lot of breakthroughs in his career. It was there where he met Robin Quivers, a newswoman and former U.S. Air Force nurse, who became a part of the Stern radio team. It was also in DC where Stern began developing a reputation for his crazy and wild antics on air. He made light of tragic situations and joked about a lot of taboo topics. Later that year, Stern moved back to New York after he accepted a job with WNBC AM. However, trouble awaited before he even got behind the microphone. His new bosses were nervous about how Howard would act while on air, so they handed the DJ a laundry list of orders on what to do and what not to do. The list prohibited Stern from using, among other tactics, jokes or sketches relating to personal tragedies, as well as slander, defamation or personal attacks on private individuals or organizations unless they have consented or are a part of the act. At first, Stern tried to follow the station's orders and play by management's rules, but, in true Howard Stern fashion, he soon pushed back against the station. He began showcasing segments like Sexual Innuendo Wednesday and Mystery Whiz, where listeners would try to guess who was going to the bathroom by the sound of how they did their business. As a result, in 1985, Stern was fired. This might have shook any other person, but Stern took this as an opportunity. Getting fired from WNBC AM freed him to sign on with the New York City-based WXRK, better known as K-Rock. That signaled the birth of the Howard Stern Show. At the new station, Stern took his radio career to new, pioneering heights. He talked about his 2 favorite topics, race and sex, quite often during his show and began making conversation about these 2 things more open. To the surprise of radio executives, Stern knocked off WNBC's Don Imus as the #1 radio personality on the ratings. A year after his arrival, Stern took the unprecedented step of syndicating his show, allowing him to get into other big cities like Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and eventually Los Angeles, New Orleans, Las Vegas, San Francisco, Dallas, Boston, and Chicago. By 1993, he was in 14 different markets and was able to get roughly 3 million daily listeners. These numbers would only grow in the years to come. Fans loved his show, and much of its success was tied to the show's fearless approach towards otherwise taboo topics. Naturally, Stern had critics. Many leftist anti-defamation groups called him racist, sexist, and homophobic. More conservative individuals condemned him as a pig who interviewed strippers and porn stars and talked freely about flatulence and masturbation. An article discusses the impact of Howard Stern on American culture back in those days. In the 1980s and early 1990s, when gay people were all but invisible elsewhere in the media, Stern's gay fans appreciated being included in his tent. Stern, I'd argue, played a bigger role in vanquishing homophobia than Ellen DeGeneres and Will and Grace. In the same way, I'm certain that countless Stern fans stopped being racists because they loved Robin, a former nurse and Air Force captain with political views the precise opposite of what they expected from black people. Stern's success only skyrocketed from there, earning him $1 million contracts with major radio studios. On December 15, 2015, Stern announced he signed a new deal with SiriusXM to continue his radio show until December of 2020. The agreement between Stern and SiriusXM includes a 12-year deal giving SiriusXM the rights to his radio and video archives for an upcoming streaming video app tentatively called Howard 360, which would, of course, feature the king of all media. Journalists and broadcasters may be some of the most controversial individuals you would meet. By nature, they seek for facts and present them as truthfully as they can. However, they are also vocal about their own opinions. This particular public figure is both loved and hated by the masses for his wit and outspoken personality, and he has gotten into quite a lot of public spats with many other prominent figures. His latest beef has to do with Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, after the Duchess spoke out about how the Crown was mistreating her. However, this is not Piers Morgan's most controversial moment. He has had many throughout his career as a journalist and TV presenter. But, in spite of it all, he is still a widely followed public figure. He has even been able to build up a net worth of over $20 million, earning himself a salary of roughly $2 million a year. How did he come to be one of the most prominent figures in all of Britain? You can check it out in the video up on your screen now, so click away, sit back, relax, and see you in the next video.